My God, how is this happening now? David Wellington's voice rang out, sharp and panicked, echoing off the sleek glass walls of the 45th floor. The normally composed CEO of Wellington Industries paced like a caged animal in his corner office, his polished shoes clacking against the marble floor. Outside his massive windows, the Chinese delegation had just stepped out of 3 gleaming black cars, parked at the front of the building. Inside, chaos brewed. The official translator essential to this $200 million deal had just called to cancel due to an unexpected family emergency. The meeting was scheduled to begin in less than 15 minutes. Executives from China's largest tech company would be sitting in the conference room, expecting flawless communication, and there was none to offer. I've called every professional in the city, said Rebecca, his assistant, phone still pressed to her ear, her brow furrowed in frustration. No one of this caliber is available on such short notice. David yanked at his Italian silk tie, sweat collecting at the base of his neck despite the office's carefully maintained climate. 2 decades of building Wellington Industries, climbing from nothing to the top of the corporate mountain, and it all threatened to unravel because of a single, sudden communication failure. The Chinese were known for their uncompromising attention to protocol. Using translation software or miming intentions would be not only disrespectful, it would be disastrous. Then from the corner of the room, a soft voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Excuse me, Mr. Wellington," said the voice, almost hesitant, but unmistakably clear. "I speak fluent Mandarin." The room fell still. Everyone turned. It was Jasmine Parker, 28 years old, standing just inside the office holding a cleaning cloth in one hand and a spray bottle in the other. She wore the standard Navy uniform of the building's custodial staff, someone no one ever really noticed. She had been working on these executive floors for 3 years, always silent, always efficient, practically invisible. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Even the hum of the air conditioning felt louder than usual. Rebecca laughed nervously, her voice brittle. "Jasmine, this isn't the time for jokes. This is a high-stakes international negotiation, not some practice role-play." But David didn't speak. He just stared at Jasmine, really seeing her for the first time. "You speak Mandarin?" he asked, his tone caught between disbelief and fading hope. "Mandarin, Cantonese, some Taiwanese too," Jasmine said with poise, not dropping his gaze. "I majored in Oriental linguistics at Howard University before I started working here." Her words landed like thunder in the quiet room. Jasmine had never dreamed that 3 years of wiping down boardroom tables and emptying waste bins would prepare her for this moment, but she had absorbed every strategy session, every heated debate, every power move. She knew how these rooms worked better than most of the suits in them. Rebecca's smirk vanished, replaced by unease. "David, you can't be serious. You're considering letting the janitor lead a critical, multinational meeting." But David wasn't so quick to dismiss her. Something in Jasmine's posture, calm, confident, rooted, made him hesitate. "Prove it," he said. Suddenly, without hesitation, Jasmine spoke, her Mandarin flowing with graceful precision. "Women huning shi jin yeni women di yagua." The sound was melodic, authoritative, effortlessly fluent. David blinked, stunned. He didn't need to understand the words to recognize fluency when he heard it. "What did you say?" he finally asked. "That it's an honor to meet you here, and we hope our cooperation will bring mutually beneficial results," Jasmine translated. "It's a traditional greeting in Chinese business culture." Rebecca crossed her arms tightly, eyes narrowed. "David, be realistic. What will they think when they see you brought in a janitor to negotiate a $200 million deal?" But Jasmine wasn't just some janitor anymore, and David knew it. He stared at her, and something shifted. Beneath the uniform, he saw not a cleaner, but a linguist, a professional, someone who had quietly absorbed the company's rhythms and culture. While everyone else looked through her, he thought about the hundreds of conversations she'd been around, the corporate chess she had silently observed. And suddenly, she didn't seem like a gamble at all. "You have 20 minutes to change," he said finally, his voice steady. "Meet me in the conference room when you're ready." Rebecca gawked. "You've lost your mind. When this goes wrong, you'll lose everything." But David wasn't listening anymore. For the first time in years, he felt something different, trust and instinct, not resumes. And Jasmine, she didn't need convincing. She was already moving, a quiet fire in her eyes. What no one in that room realized was that she'd been preparing for this moment, long before they even knew her name. And as for Rebecca, she was about to learn just how dangerous it can be to underestimate someone who's spent their life being overlooked. Exactly 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in the glass-walled conference room changed the moment Jasmine walked in. Gone was the uniform. In its place, a simple but elegant black outfit borrowed from the receptionist. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a low bun. She carried a notepad and a pen, her stride graceful but firm. Thomas, the CFO, muttered, "Jesus Christ, is that really her?" Rebecca didn't even try to lower her voice as she leaned toward another assistant. "You can shine a piece of coal, but it's still coal inside." The Chinese delegation had already arrived and were seated, speaking quietly in Mandarin as they gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. Their suits were flawless, their expressions unreadable. David made the introductions, deliberately avoiding Jasmine's job title. He simply said, "This is Ms. Parker. She'll be translating for us." Jasmine stepped forward with a polite bow and a warm greeting in perfect Mandarin. From that moment, the room shifted. Respect bloomed where doubt had been. Jasmine moved through the meeting with grace, translating not only words, but nuance, tone, and cultural rhythm. And as the deal progressed, it became unmistakably clear. This was no accident. She wasn't lucky. She was ready. Rebecca sat in stiff silence, watching the girl she had once dismissed command the room with ease. Because sometimes, the person most equipped to change everything isn't the one with the corner office, it's the one who's spent years studying the game, quietly from the shadows. "This is Jasmine Parker, our international relations specialist for the Asian market," David announced, enunciating each syllable with precision. The leader of the Chinese delegation, Mr. Chun, offered a respectful bow. Jasmine returned it gracefully, then spoke in flawless Mandarin thanking him for the honor of meeting, complimenting their punctuality, a deeply respected trait in Chinese culture. His expression brightened with visible delight. For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine orchestrated the dialogue like a symphony conductor. Her translations went far beyond words. She captured tone, subtext, humor, even the delicate nuances of diplomacy. Jokes that could have easily fallen flat were instead met with genuine laughter from the delegation. The conversation flowed effortlessly, the kind of cross-cultural harmony no one had dared to expect. And that was exactly when Rebecca struck. "Jasmine," she interrupted with a syrupy smile that barely concealed its sting. "Maybe now would be a good time to share with our guests the unique journey that led you here." David's eyes flicked toward her in silent warning, but she continued, her tone thick with mock admiration. "It's just so inspiring to see someone reinvent themselves like that. Moving up in life, you know." The insult was razor sharp in its subtlety, but Jasmine had heard sharper. She remembered all too clearly what it felt like to leave Howard University midway through her junior year. Her dreams set aside the day her diabetic mother lost her job and needed someone to help with the bills and survive. The taste of humiliation was familiar, but she didn't let it show. Life has a way of presenting opportunities in unexpected places, Jasmine replied evenly, voice calm and composed. Mr. Chun watched the exchange closely, a flicker of confusion crossing his otherwise impassive face. Jasmine turned slightly toward him and added in Mandarin, "Who would have thought that someone who was cleaning these very rooms just 3 years ago would be sitting here today?" She let the moment breathe, her words intentionally chosen to land softly, yet firmly. "It shows how much our company values diversity in every form." The silence that followed was sharp. Mr. Chun's expression shifted, no hostility, just the subtle discomfort of someone confronting a new and unsettling truth. In his world, professional hierarchy was sacred. Jasmine saw it immediately, felt the air change. David jumped in quickly to repair the moment. "What Rebecca meant is that we recognize and promote talent wherever it's found." But it was too late. Jasmine could sense the shift in the room. The Chinese executives were still polite, still engaging, but something essential had broken. She wasn't a peer anymore. She had become an anomaly, an outlier, a curiosity, and something inside her hardened. For 3 years, she had scrubbed these walls while powerful people closed billion-dollar deals, made strategic decisions, whispered confidences behind half-open doors. She had seen how things really worked, especially how Rebecca operated. The lies about quarterly numbers, the stolen credit for projects others had slaved over, the misused confidential information. Jasmine had seen it all, heard it all, and more importantly, she had remembered all of it. The meeting limped to a close with a polite but non-committal response. They would carefully consider the proposal, a diplomatic way of saying maybe, if nothing better comes along. As the delegation left, Rebecca was practically glowing with smug satisfaction. "Well," she said, making a show of gathering her papers, "that was interesting. Next time, perhaps we should be more upfront about everyone's credentials." From the start, David looked ready to explode, but before he could speak, Jasmine stood. Her voice was low and composed. "Rebecca," she said, her eyes fixed steadily, "Mr. Chun mentioned something quite fascinating before he left." Rebecca's brow lifted. "Oh, and what was that?" "He said he was impressed by my fluency," Jasmine said, "but he was confused about the power dynamics at the table." Rebecca's smirk faltered. He wondered why the person facilitating all communication wasn't introduced as the lead negotiator, since, in their culture, the speaker of the language is assumed to hold authority. Jasmine let the weight of that cultural misstep settle into the room like smoke. "He asked if I'd call him later to clarify a few things about our structure." Rebecca blinked. The color in her face faded a shade. He didn't just want clarification, he wanted Jasmine. And he wanted to understand why someone so central had been positioned as peripheral. For years, Jasmine had walked these halls unnoticed, and now, that invisibility had become her greatest strength. Every slight, every insult, every attempt to undermine her had not diminished her, it had forged something sharper, something quieter, and far more dangerous. 2 hours later, Jasmine was back in her navy blue uniform, pushing her cart through the executive corridor. But every step now had precision. Every movement had purpose. This wasn't submission. This was reconnaissance. She had memorized the conversations, the whispers behind closed doors. She had seen files left carelessly on desks, especially in Rebecca's office, emails open on screens, phone calls not properly muted, confidential documents tucked sloppily into drawers. Jasmine had it all. She had watched, and she had waited. "Look who's back where she belongs," Rebecca announced loudly, laughing with Jennifer from accounting as they passed her in the hallway. "After that little performance today, it's good to know everyone's still in their proper place." Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her hands moved on autopilot while her mind cataloged every word, every tone. Rebecca still believed she was just a cleaner, still believed she'd won. She had no idea what Jasmine had seen in those bottom drawers: proof of rigged contracts, manipulation of smaller competitors, evidence that could unravel everything. "You know what bothers me the most?" Rebecca said, smirking to Jennifer. "That David actually thought a janitor could salvage a $200 million deal. As if mopping floors makes you qualified to negotiate with global executives." At that exact moment, Jasmine's phone vibrated. She pulled it out discreetly. A message written in Chinese characters. It was from Mr. Chun, and Jasmine didn't need to read further to know. Her moment had come. Jasmine's heart pounded as she reread the message. "I'd like to speak with you privately about our company and your future. Could we meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Mandarin Cafe on 42nd Street? I have a proposal I think you'll find compelling." This wasn't just a follow-up. It wasn't just about translation. Jasmine knew it. During the earlier meeting, she had sensed that Mr. Chun had been analyzing much more than her Mandarin fluency. He had been measuring her sharpness, her composure, her awareness of dynamics that most overlooked, and she hadn't flinched once. Later that night, in her modest Brooklyn apartment, Jasmine sat in front of her laptop. She opened a file she had quietly, cautiously curated for nearly 2 years, not out of paranoia, but foresight, preparation. Hidden behind folders marked with boring labels, The file named Wellington Industries. Irregularities stretched across 63 pages. It held carefully archived emails, some Rebecca assumed had vanished into deletion, along with time-stamped call logs from weekends Jasmine had worked late, and high-resolution photos of documents, proof that Rebecca had deliberately sabotaged deals involving black-owned businesses. 3 contracts in the past 18 months, ruined without just cause. Jasmine had watched her smile and lie to clients, had watched her appropriate credit for ideas that weren't hers. And perhaps most telling, Jasmine had seen the subtle, repeated pattern of blocking certain employees from advancing, not because of talent, but because of image. At exactly 10 a.m. the next day, Jasmine stepped into Mandarin Cafe. She wore a graceful, understated outfit, one she had bought with her first college savings. Back when hope was stronger than experience, Mr. Chun was already there, seated beside an impeccably dressed woman who introduced herself as Lisa Wong, Vice President of International Development. Miss Parker, Mr. Chun began in English, then seamlessly shifted to Mandarin. Yesterday, I observed something far more valuable than linguistic skill. I saw a woman who stands steady in the storm. Lisa smiled, her gaze sharp and kind. We're expanding operations in North America, and we need someone who not only understands the language, but understands the game. Someone who has watched the way American companies move their strengths, their blind spots. Mr. Chun leaned in, his voice calm but charged with meaning. And someone who has the self-respect not to cower before small people in oversized titles. For 2 hours, Jasmine navigated the conversation with practiced ease and genuine insight. She discussed cross-cultural negotiation tactics, market trends, and the particular ways in which Western companies misunderstood Asian investors. She didn't name names, but she gently hinted at certain irregularities she had witnessed. Mr. Chun and Lisa didn't press. They didn't need to. When the conversation ended, Lisa slid a card across the table. Jasmine turned it over and read, Parker and Associates, International Consulting. The number written below the title represented a salary 5 times higher than what she currently earned. Consider our offer, Mr. Chun said, rising from his seat with dignified grace. There is one thing, however. We would like you to begin by helping us investigate discrepancies in Wellington Industries contracts. There appears to be evidence of serious violations of international trade law. Jasmine nodded, her expression neutral but her mind racing. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow, Lisa added. The Chinese delegation has officially filed a complaint. It may be useful for you to attend. That night, Jasmine called her mother. Mom, she said softly. Remember how you always said that patience is a smart woman's sharpest weapon? Of course, honey. Why, I think I finally understand what you meant. After she hung up, Jasmine stood at her window, watching the Manhattan skyline shimmer with silent possibility. Tomorrow, the people who had treated her like office wallpaper would discover something far more unsettling than a disgruntled employee. They would come face to face with a strategist, one who had seen everything, heard everything, and remembered every slight, every lie, every act of injustice cloaked in corporate polish. And unlike the executives who mistook humility for weakness, Jasmine had learned that power doesn't always speak loud. It watches, prepares, and strikes when no one sees it coming. The next morning, tension saturated the air in the Wellington Industries boardroom. The full board had been summoned. An emergency meeting. David's face was pale and drawn. The report from the Chinese delegation clutched in his hand. The words federal investigation hung heavy in the air like storm clouds. Rebecca entered in a blaze of color crimson suit, sharp heels, her posture radiating confidence. She had spent the night constructing her defense with ruthless precision, fully prepared to shift blame onto the quiet cleaning woman David had inexplicably brought into the negotiation. She began before anyone else could speak. I assume this is about yesterday's disaster. As I warned, assigning an inexperienced employee to a negotiation of this scale was reckless. And now, it's cost us $200 million. That was the moment the door opened. Quietly, Jasmine walked in, not in her usual work attire, but dressed in faultless elegance, her presence commanding without a word. Every head turned, Every assumption began to crack. Asterisk asterisk. The gray ensemble wasn't borrowed, it had been purchased just the night before, paid for with the advance Jasmine received from the Chinese firm. She carried a sleek leather briefcase and a laptop, walking into the boardroom with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally stepped into the role she was always meant to play. "Apologies for being late," Jasmine said coolly as she settled into the seat beside David. "I was finalizing some crucial data for today's discussion." Rebecca's face twitched, her irritation thinly masked. "With all due respect, David, I don't understand why she's even here. This is supposed to be an executive-level meeting." "She's here," David responded, voice clipped and cold, "because the Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence to clarify serious allegations brought against us." Jasmine opened her laptop, her movements measured and deliberate. "Mr. Chun approached me yesterday afternoon. He shared grave concerns regarding Wellington Industries' contracting practices. According to him, there's compelling evidence of bid manipulation and deliberate obstruction of rival companies." "That's absurd," Rebecca burst out, her voice rising. "What kind of proof could a cleaning lady possibly have about executive affairs?" A soft, devastating smile curved Jasmine's lips. "The kind you gather when you're invisible for 3 years, and people speak around you like you're furniture." Rebecca's expression faltered for the first time. A flicker of fear registered in her eyes. Jasmine connected her laptop to the projector. The first image that appeared on the screen was a 6-month-old internal email. "This," Jasmine began, "is an email Rebecca sent to Mills Corporation. It includes confidential data about Johnson Company's proposals, our primary competitor at the time." The room fell into stunned silence. Rebecca opened her mouth, but Jasmine was already clicking to the next slide. "This document reveals how Rebecca deliberately inflated budgets for projects led by Black and Latino staff, causing cancellations she later blamed on their incompetence." Spreadsheets appeared, followed by a flurry of damning internal emails and security footage. For 3 years, Jasmine had quietly amassed evidence, dates, files, and recordings like a ghost in the halls. "This is a lie," Rebecca shrieked, leaping to her feet. "She's twisting everything to get back at me for revealing who she really was in the company." Unmoved, Jasmine remained seated. "Mr. David, the audio I'm about to play comes from our own security system, recorded 8 months ago." Rebecca's voice blared through the speakers. "We can't let people like that think they belong in executive meetings. We have to preserve the company's image." A deathly pallor washed over Rebecca's face. She remembered that conversation and offhand remarked to Thomas in what she thought was a private moment. Jasmine clicked again. "This next clip is from just 2 weeks ago," she said. Rebecca can be heard instructing the receptionist to discard resumes from candidates whose names sounded too ethnic. Mr. Johnson, a senior director who had served the company for 15 years, leaned forward. "Rebecca, is that accurate?" Rebecca's voice wavered. That's completely out of context. You don't understand the pressure I'm under to preserve company standards." Jasmine didn't raise her voice. "And those standards, Rebecca, include ethics, transparency, and full adherence to federal anti-discrimination law, all of which have been grossly violated." David turned toward Rebecca, his expression like stone. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be fired for cause and reported to the district attorney." Rebecca's eyes darted around the table, searching in vain for support. She found none. "You're making a huge mistake," she whispered. "She's just a bitter cleaning lady who," David cut in sharply, "is now our director of international relations, and you're fired." Silence clamped down like a steel trap. Rebecca remained standing, slightly swaying, her 15-year career reduced to ashes in less than 10 minutes. "Your credentials will be deactivated immediately," David continued. "Security will escort you to gather your belongings. And given the severity of what's been shown today, the evidence will be turned over to the federal prosecutor's office." As security entered the room, Rebecca cast one final venomous look toward Jasmine. "You might have won today," she sneered, "but it won't change what you are." Jasmine met her glare without flinching. "You're right. I am what I've always been. Someone who listens, learns, and moves when it matters." The only difference now is that I'm exactly where I belong." 3 hours later, as the meeting adjourned and Jasmine was officially appointed to her new role, David pulled her aside. "How did you manage all of this? 3 years of notes, audio, documents," she said with the smallest of smiles. "When you're treated like office furniture, people forget that furniture sees and hears everything." She walked slowly toward her new office, one of glass and light, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. In that moment, Jasmine understood. True victory wasn't in Rebecca's fall, it was in creating something that could never be taken away. 6 months later, Jasmine Parker sat at her desk on the 38th floor, surrounded by contracts and correspondence in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English. The deals she'd closed had brought in over $400 million. "Jasmine," her assistant Jennifer said from the doorway, "the South Korean delegation has arrived. They're eager to meet you." Jasmine stood, adjusted the cuffs of her tailored blazer, and smiled. The room she walked into now wasn't one she had cleaned. It was one she owned. To meet the woman who had tripled their business in Asia in just 6 months, what once would have sounded like an impossible dream, had now become Wellington Industries' proudest reality. Through the tall glass window of her office, Jasmine Parker looked out at the same city she used to view while pushing a mop. Back then, she had been invisible, a cleaning lady blending into the background. But today, as the company's director of international relations, she was one of the most respected executives in all of Manhattan. Her impressive $300,000 annual salary not only ensured her mother received the best possible treatment for her diabetes, but also allowed Jasmine to complete her master's degree through an elite executive program at Columbia University. Jennifer, her assistant, scrolled through her digital calendar. "What about Forbes next week?" she asked. "Confirmed," Jasmine replied, smoothly, adjusting the sleek navy blue blazer she now wore not because she had to, but because she chose to. "They want to discuss my inclusion on the list of the country's most influential young female executives across the city." In a modest Queens apartment, Rebecca sat alone. The once powerful executive now lived in a small, sparsely furnished space after being evicted from her high-end Manhattan condo. Stacks of unpaid medical bills for ongoing psychological therapy cluttered the coffee table, joined by a depressing pile of rejection letters from companies that no longer saw her as employable. The federal investigation into her history of discriminatory behavior had cost her $50.00 in personal fines and barred her from holding executive roles at any firm with federal contracts. For the next 5 years, her name had become synonymous with toxic leadership, splashed across every major business outlet. That morning, she had stared blankly at the cover of Business Week, where Jasmine beamed alongside a team of Chinese executives beneath the bold headline, "The Translator Who Revolutionized International Business." The irony struck with bitter force. Back at Wellington Industries, David Wellington called an emergency board meeting to present the extraordinary quarterly results. "Jasmine Parker didn't just rescue our Chinese partnership," he told the boardroom full of senior executives. "She opened gateways to international markets we had once written off as unattainable." Mr. Johnson, the same black director who had once witnessed Rebecca's unraveling, stood to say a few words. "In over 4 decades in corporate America," he began, "rarely have I seen a transformation as profound as the one Jasmine brought to this company. She proved that real talent doesn't care about race, background, or prejudice. It speaks for itself." Thunderous applause filled the room, yet Jasmine sat quietly, composed, remembering how she had once cleaned that same room only 7 months earlier. That evening, in her tastefully renovated Upper East Side apartment, Jasmine's phone rang. It was her mother. "Honey, I saw you on TV today," she said, voice full of pride. "You spoke so beautifully about perseverance and second chances. I learned from the best." Jasmine replied, smiling, "You always said people might try to belittle us, but they can never take away what we know or what we're capable of becoming." During the televised interview, Jasmine had been asked whether she held any resentment toward Rebecca, considering everything that had happened. Her answer was poised, dignified, and unforgettable. Rebecca gave me one of the most valuable gifts I've ever received. She showed me exactly the kind of person I never want to become. Her arrogance taught me that true power isn't about stepping on others, but about lifting people up. 3 weeks later, Jasmine stood at the podium of Howard University, her alma mater, as she unveiled a new scholarship program designed to support students who had been forced to interrupt their education due to financial hardship. No one should ever have to choose between taking care of their family and pursuing their dreams, she said to an audience of 500 students, many of whom fought back tears. The program, which she named Second Chance, was partially funded by Jasmine's own salary and had already granted full scholarships to 20 students for the upcoming semester. In her small apartment, Rebecca watched the ceremony online. As Jasmine spoke about hope, growth, and giving back, Rebecca shut her laptop. But this time, the tears that streamed down her cheeks weren't born of self-pity. For the first time in months, she felt something that resembled real regret. Meanwhile, back at Wellington Industries, Jasmine walked through the same corridors she had once quietly cleaned. Now greeted with respect and admiration, junior executives sought her guidance. Assistants looked to her for mentorship. She had taken 5 promising employees under her wing, individuals who, like she once had, held hidden potential overlooked by others. In a rare moment of quiet, David spoke with her in private. You had the power to destroy Rebecca, he said. You knew things that could have ended her for good, but you chose not to use them. Why? Jasmine gave a soft smile. The best revenge isn't about tearing someone down. It's about building something so powerful, so undeniable, that whatever they did to hurt you becomes meaningless. Jasmine Parker's story wasn't just about success, it was about resilience, dignity, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth even when others refuse to see it. She turned 3 years of invisibility into the greatest asset of her career. She reminded the world that often, the most powerful people are the ones no one sees coming, the observers, the learners, the patient architects of something extraordinary. Rebecca had tried to humiliate her out of prejudice and insecurity, only to become the author of her own downfall. Jasmine's rise became a lesson etched into corporate history. True leadership is never about power or privilege. It's about recognizing potential where others see limitation. It's about integrity, vision, and lifting others even while you climb. If this story touched your heart, remember, true talent, paired with unwavering dignity, always finds its way to the top, no matter how many obstacles stand in its path.